The dust kicked up in little whirlwinds around Zelda Wright's worn boots as she marched toward the half-constructed mercantile building on Main Street. Her hands balled into fists, so tight, her knuckles had gone white beneath the grime and sawdust. 3 weeks she had worked alongside the men, hauling timber and hammering nails from sunrise to sunset under the brutal Idaho sun of 1883. And now, Horace Cartwright sat behind his makeshift desk with a smug expression, telling her she would receive half the wages promised because she was a woman and women did not deserve a man's pay no matter how hard they worked. "Mr. Cartwright, we had an agreement," Zelda said, her voice steady despite the fury building in her chest like steam in a locomotive. "You told me $2 a day, same as the others. I have done the same work, put in the same hours, and you cannot change the terms now that the job is nearly finished." Horace Cartwright was a thick-necked man with a perpetual sheen of sweat on his forehead and small eyes that reminded Zelda of a pig assessing slop. He leaned back in his creaking chair and waved a dismissive hand, his fingers adorned with rings that probably cost more than Zelda had earned in the past year. "Now, Miss Wright, you should be grateful I hired you at all. A woman on a construction site is irregular enough without demanding the same pay as a man. You will take your $1 a day and be thankful for it, or you will get nothing at all." The other workers had already been paid and departed, their pockets jingling with honest wages for honest work. Zelda had waited until last, a mistake she now recognized because Cartwright had planned this humiliation all along. She needed that money desperately. Her mother was ill back in their rented room above the millinery shop, and the doctor's bills were mounting faster than Zelda could earn. She had taken this construction job when Mrs. Henderson at the dress shop could not afford to keep her on, swallowing her pride and ignoring the stares and whispers, because survival mattered more than propriety. "I will not accept half wages for full work," Zelda said, her voice rising despite her efforts to remain calm. "That is theft, plain and simple." Cartwright's expression hardened, and he stood abruptly, his considerable bulk making the temporary office structure shudder. "You will accept what I give you and leave my sight, or I will have you removed. There is not a judge or lawman in Caldwell, Idaho, who will take the word of a woman over mine. Now get out before I decide you deserve nothing for your insolence." Zelda felt tears prick at her eyes, but she refused to let them fall in front of this man. She turned sharply and walked out of the structure, her throat tight with rage and desperation. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on the dusty street, and she stood there for a moment, trying to gather her thoughts and figure out what to do next. $42 she was owed. $42 that meant the difference between her mother receiving proper care and watching her waste away. She did not notice the man leaning against the post outside the building until he spoke, his voice low and measured with a hint of something dangerous underneath. That was a shameful thing to witness. Zelda turned sharply and found herself looking at a cowboy she had seen around Caldwell a few times but never spoken to directly. He was tall and lean, with sun-bronzed skin and dark hair that fell just past his collar beneath a well-worn Stetson. His eyes were a startling blue-gray, like storm clouds over the mountains, and they studied her with an intensity that made her catch her breath. He wore the practical clothes of a working ranch hand, denim trousers and a faded blue shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, revealing corded forearms. A gun belt sat low on his hips, the leather worn smooth with use. "You were listening," Zelda said, embarrassment flooding through her. It was bad enough to be cheated without having witnesses to her humiliation. "Hard not to hear when the walls are that thin," the cowboy said, straightening from his casual lean. He removed his hat in a gesture of respect, revealing more of his angular face and the serious set of his jaw. "Name is Owen Blake. I have been working on the Henderson Ranch north of town, but I know Horace Cartwright by reputation. He has a history of sharp dealing and taking advantage of folks who do not have the power to fight back." Zelda studied him warily, unsure what to make of this intervention. In her experience, men rarely helped women without expecting something in return, and she had no currency to offer except her labor, which had just been deemed worthless. "Zelda Wright," she said finally, "and knowing his reputation does not help me get my wages." "No, but maybe I can," Owen said, settling his hat back on his head. "How much does he owe you?" $42 for 3 weeks of work," Zelda said, lifting her chin defensively. "And before you suggest that I am exaggerating, I can show you the signed agreement we made." I insisted on it in writing, though apparently that means nothing. Something flickered in Owen's eyes, a combination of approval and anger. "You were smart to get it in writing. That gives us something to work with." He glanced at the construction office where Cartwright was presumably counting his ill-gotten savings. But going through official channels in this town would be difficult. Cartwright has the mayor and half the town council in his pocket through various business dealings. "We would need a different approach." "We," Zelda repeated, confusion mixing with a faint, desperate hope. "Why would you involve yourself in my troubles? You do not know me, and there is nothing in this for you except possibly making an enemy of a wealthy man." Owen was quiet for a moment, his gaze distant as if remembering something painful. When he spoke again, his voice was soft but firm. "My mother worked herself to death when I was young, taking in laundry and mending because my father died and left us with nothing. She was cheated more times than I can count by people who knew she had no recourse, who knew she would take any pay rather than watch her children starve. I was too young then to do anything about it, but I am not too young now." He looked at Zelda directly, and she saw the absolute sincerity in his expression. "Nobody should work hard and be denied honest pay. It is not right, and I mean to see you get what you are owed." Zelda felt something crack open in her chest, a warmth spreading through the cold fury that had taken residence there. She was so accustomed to fighting alone, to being dismissed and overlooked, that having someone stand beside her felt almost foreign. "What kind of different approach?" she asked cautiously. A slow smile crossed Owen's face, transforming his serious features into something almost mischievous. "Horace Cartwright is a businessman, which means he cares about his reputation and his profits. If we can threaten either of those things, he might become more reasonable." "Do you trust me?" It was an absurd question. Zelda had known this man for all of 5 minutes, and trust was not something she gave easily. But there was something steady and honest in Owen Blake's eyes, something that made her want to believe him despite her better judgment. "I do not have many options," she said finally. "So yes, for now I will trust you. What do you need from me?" "That written agreement, for one," Owen said. "And any witnesses who saw you working the same hours and doing the same labor as the men. Can you get me those things?" Zelda nodded slowly. The agreement was tucked safely in her room, and there were at least 3 other workers who had seen her efforts daily. 2 of them were decent men who had treated her fairly, even helping her with some of the heavier lifting without condescension. "I can have the agreement within the hour, and I know where to find the witnesses. But what will you do with that information?" "First, I am going to have a conversation with Mr. Cartwright," Owen said. "A private one where I explain very clearly that cheating workers is bad for business, especially when it can be proven in writing. And if that does not work well, I have a few other ideas." He glanced at the sun, which was beginning its descent toward the western horizon. "Meet me at the Silver Spur Saloon at 7 o'clock this evening. Bring the agreement and whatever witnesses you can gather, We will make our case properly." Zelda wanted to ask more questions, to understand exactly what Owen had in mind, but something in his demeanor suggested this was not the time. Instead, she nodded and started to turn away, then paused. "Mr. Blake, why are you really doing this? The truth, please." Owen met her eyes, and for a moment, the bustling street around them seemed to fade away. "Because it is the right thing to do," he said simply. "And because I can see you are someone who fights for what is fair, and people like that deserve to have someone fight alongside them." He tipped his hat to her. "7 o'clock, Miss Wright. Do not be late." Zelda watched him walk away, his long stride carrying him down the dusty street with the confidence of a man who knew exactly what he was about. She felt something unfamiliar flutter in her stomach, something beyond gratitude and relief. She pushed it aside firmly. This was about getting her wages, nothing more. She could not afford distractions, especially not in the form of a handsome cowboy with storm-cloud eyes and a sense of justice. She hurried back to her rented room, taking the narrow stairs 2 at a time despite her exhaustion. Her mother was dozing in the bed they shared, her thin face peaceful in sleep. Zelda moved quietly, retrieving the folded agreement from the small trunk that held all their worldly possessions. The paper was crisp and official, bearing both her signature and Cartwright's, along with the clearly stated terms of $2 per day for construction work. She tucked it carefully into her skirt pocket and then splashed water on her face from the basin, trying to scrub away the worst of the dust and grime. Her mother stirred and opened her eyes, focusing slowly on Zelda. "Did you get your wages, dear?" she asked, her voice thin and reedy. Zelda forced a smile. "Not yet, Mama, but I am working on it. There was a small complication, but a gentleman is helping me resolve it. You rest now. I need to go out for a bit this evening, but I will be back soon." Her mother's brow furrowed with concern, but she was too weak to press for details. Zelda kissed her forehead gently and promised to bring back soup from the boarding house kitchen. Then she set out to find the witnesses Owen had requested. She located Bill Thornton first, a grizzled older man who had worked construction for 3 decades and treated everyone with the same gruff fairness. He was sitting on the porch of his boarding house, smoking a pipe and watching the evening activity on the street. When Zelda explained the situation, his weathered face hardened with anger. "That snake," Bill muttered. "I wondered why he paid us out so quick and sent us on our way. He was planning to cheat you all along." He knocked the ash from his pipe against the railing. "I will come to the Silver Spur and tell anyone who asks that you worked harder than half the men on that crew and deserve every penny of your wages. 7 o'clock, you said." Zelda nodded gratefully and moved on to find Samuel Porter, a younger man of about 25 who had been kind to her during the 3 weeks of work. He was equally outraged when she explained what had happened and agreed immediately to serve as a witness. She could not locate the third potential witness, a quiet man named James who had already left town for another job, but 2 witnesses plus the written agreement would have to be enough. By the time Zelda entered the Silver Spur Saloon at precisely 7 o'clock, her nerves were wound tight with anticipation and anxiety. The saloon was moderately busy, with men gathered around tables playing cards and the bartender serving drinks with practiced efficiency. Owen was already there, standing near the back wall in a position where he could see the entire room. He nodded when he saw her and gestured toward a table in the corner that offered some privacy. Bill and Samuel arrived within minutes, and the 4 of them gathered around the table. Owen listened intently as Zelda produced the written agreement, and as Bill and Samuel recounted their observations of her work. He asked a few pointed questions about specific days and tasks, building a clear picture of the situation. When they had finished, he sat back and studied the document carefully. "This is ironclad," Owen said finally. "Cartwright's signature is right here and the terms are crystal clear. Any honest judge would rule in your favor." He looked up at Zelda. "But as we discussed, getting an honest judgment in this town would be complicated. So here is what I propose. We are going to make Mr. Cartwright an offer he would be a fool to refuse." "What kind of offer?" Samuel asked, his young face eager. Owen's expression turned hard. "The kind where he pays every penny owed plus interest for the 3 weeks of delayed payment. Or I make sure every worker within 50 miles knows he is a cheat who will not honor his agreements. A man who relies on hiring labor cannot afford that reputation, especially not with the railroad expansion bringing new construction projects to the area. Word travels fast among working men, and if they refuse to work for him, his business dealings will collapse." Zelda felt a surge of fierce satisfaction at the plan. "He will be furious," she said, "and he might retaliate. Let him try," Owen said quietly, and there was steel beneath the calm tone. "I have dealt with bullies before, Miss Wright. They tend to back down when someone stands up to them properly." He glanced at Bill and Samuel. "Would you gentlemen be willing to spread the word about Cartwright's practices if he refuses to pay? Not lies or exaggerations, just the simple truth of what happened." Bill grinned, showing the gap where he had lost a tooth years ago. "I would be delighted to tell every worker I know that Horace Cartwright cheats women out of honest wages. That kind of man does not deserve anyone's labor." Samuel nodded vigorously. "I will do the same. My father works construction too, and he knows men all over Idaho territory. We can make sure Cartwright's name becomes mud." Owen stood, his hand resting casually on his gun belt in a way that suggested he knew how to use the weapon if necessary. "Then let us go have a conversation with Mr. Cartwright. He should still be at his office tallying his accounts." The 5 of them made an unlikely group walking through the darkening streets of Caldwell, but Zelda felt stronger with them beside her than she had felt in months. When they reached the construction site, lamplight spilled from the temporary office structure, confirming that Cartwright was indeed still there. Owen knocked firmly on the door frame. "We are closed," Cartwright's irritated voice called from inside. "Come back tomorrow." "This cannot wait until tomorrow," Owen said, his tone polite but unyielding. "We need to discuss a matter of unpaid wages." There was a pause, then heavy footsteps, and Cartwright appeared in the doorway. His expression went from annoyed to wary when he saw the group assembled before him. His eyes lingered on Owen with particular suspicion. "Who are you? And what is this about?" "My name is Owen Blake, and I am here representing Miss Zelda Wright in the matter of the $42 you owe her for 3 weeks of construction work." Owen gestured for Zelda to produce the agreement, which she handed to him. He held it up so Cartwright could see his own signature. "You agreed in writing to pay $2 per day, which amounts to $42 for 21 days of work. You have refused to honor that agreement, which is both illegal and morally reprehensible." Cartwright's face flushed red. "This is none of your concern, Blake. This is between me and the girl." "The woman," Owen corrected sharply. "Miss Wright is not a girl. She is an adult worker who fulfilled her end of the bargain, and it became my concern when I witnessed you attempting to cheat her." He stepped closer, not threatening but definitely imposing. "Here is how this is going to work. You are going to pay Miss Wright the full $42 you owe her, plus an additional $4.20 as interest for the 3 weeks she has had to wait. That is 10%, which is more than fair considering your breach of contract." "I will do no such thing," Cartwright sputtered, but Zelda could see the uncertainty in his eyes. He was not accustomed to being challenged, especially not on his own property. Then I will make sure every worker in Idaho territory knows you cannot be trusted to honor your agreements, Owen said calmly. These gentlemen here are willing to testify to Miss Wright's work ethic and the injustice of your actions. By this time next week, you will not be able to hire a single man for any of your projects, and your half-finished buildings will sit abandoned while your competitors complete their contracts. Is your pride really worth destroying your business? Bill stepped forward, adding his gravelly voice to the confrontation. I have worked construction for 30 years, Cartwright, and I know men in every town from here to Boise. You pay Miss Wright what you owe her, or I will personally make sure you never get decent workers again. Samuel nodded his agreement. My family has connections with most of the labor crews in the territory. One word from us, and you are finished. Cartwright looked from face to face, clearly calculating his options and finding them all unsatisfactory. His gaze finally settled on Zelda, and she met his eyes without flinching, letting him see that she would not back down. The silence stretched taut, broken only by the distant sounds of the town settling into evening. This is extortion, Cartwright said finally, but his bluster had weakened considerably. No, this is justice, Owen replied. Extortion would be demanding more than what is owed. We are simply ensuring you fulfill your legal and moral obligations. $46.20, Mr. Cartwright. Right now. For a moment, Zelda thought Cartwright might refuse out of sheer stubbornness, but then he turned abruptly and went back into the office. They heard him muttering and the sound of a safe being opened. When he returned, he had a small leather pouch that clinked with the sound of coins. He counted out the money with obvious reluctance, slapping each coin onto Owen's outstretched palm with more force than necessary. Owen counted it carefully, then nodded and handed the money to Zelda. $46.20, as agreed. I suggest you thank Miss Wright for her excellent work and for not pursuing legal action against you for breach of contract. Cartwright's jaw worked as if he were chewing on something bitter. Consider yourself blacklisted, Miss Wright. You will never work another construction job in this territory. That is fine by me, Zelda said, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. I would rather starve than work for a cheat like you, Mr. Cartwright. I hope your conscience bothers you, though I suspect you do not have one. She turned and walked away before he could respond, the money clutched tightly in her hand. Owen fell into step beside her, with Bill and Samuel following. They walked in silence until they were well away from the construction site, and then Zelda stopped abruptly, her composure finally cracking. I cannot believe that worked, she said, her voice shaking with a combination of relief and residual adrenaline. I thought he would refuse or threaten violence or something. Bullies usually fold when someone calls their bluff, Owen said gently. And Cartwright is smart enough to know he cannot afford the reputation damage we threatened. Money is all that matters to men like him. Zelda turned to Bill and Samuel, gratitude overwhelming her. Thank you both so much. I could not have done this without your testimony. Bill waved off her thanks gruffly. Just glad to see justice done, Miss Wright. You earned that money fair and square. He tipped his hat and headed off toward his boarding house. Samuel lingered a moment longer, giving her an encouraging smile. If you need anything else, you know where to find me. Take care of yourself, Miss Wright. He nodded to Owen with respect and then departed as well. Zelda stood alone with Owen in the gathering darkness, suddenly very aware of his proximity and the warmth radiating from his tall frame. Mr. Blake, I do not know how to thank you properly. You barely know me, yet you risked making an enemy of a powerful man on my behalf. Owen shook his head. Horace Cartwright is not powerful, he is just wealthy, and there is a difference. Power comes from integrity and the respect of good people. Cartwright has neither. He met her eyes, and even in the dim light she could see the intensity there. And I told you my reasons, Miss Wright. They were true. I cannot stand by and watch people be cheated when I have the ability to help. Still, I am in your debt, Zelda said softly. If there is ever anything I can do to repay this kindness, you need only ask. There is no debt, Owen said firmly, but if you are offering, perhaps you would join me for supper sometime. Not as payment, but because I would very much like to know more about a woman brave enough to work construction and strong enough to stand up to men like Cartwright. Zelda felt heat rise to her cheeks, and she was grateful for the darkness that concealed her blush. I would like that, she said, surprising herself with how much she meant it. Though I should warn you, I am not very good company lately. My life has been rather difficult. I am not looking for entertaining company, Owen said with a slight smile. I am looking for honest company, and I suspect you are very good at that. He glanced down the street toward the millinery shop where Zelda lived. May I walk you home? It is getting late and the streets are not always safe after dark. Zelda agreed, and they walked together in comfortable silence. When they reached her building, she turned to him one more time. Mr. Blake, why did you really come to Caldwell? You said you have been working at the Henderson Ranch, but that does not explain why you are here specifically. Owen was quiet for a long moment, his eyes distant. I have been drifting for a few years now, working ranch jobs and moving on when the restlessness gets too strong. I was not looking for a place to settle, just a place to work for a while. But standing up for you tonight, doing something that mattered beyond just earning wages, that felt right in a way nothing has felt in a long time. Maybe I have been drifting because I have not found something worth staying for. He looked at her directly. Someone worth staying for. Zelda's breath caught in her throat. She had been proposed to twice in her 22 years, both times by men who wanted a housekeeper and a brood mare more than a partner. She had rejected both offers without hesitation. But Owen Blake was not proposing. He was simply being honest about his interest, and that honesty was more appealing than any flowery declaration she had ever heard. I should go, she said softly. My mother will be worried if I am out too late, but Mr. Blake, Owen, thank you for everything. You are welcome, Zelda, he said, using her first name for the first time, and the sound of it in his deep voice sent a pleasant shiver through her. Sleep well, and when you are ready for that supper, you can find me at the Henderson Ranch or here in town most evenings. Zelda climbed the stairs to her room, her heart beating faster than the exertion warranted. When she entered, her mother was awake, reading by lamplight. She looked up with concern when Zelda came in. Did you get your wages? She asked anxiously. Zelda pulled out the money and counted it onto the small table, the coins glinting in the lamplight. Every penny plus interest for the delay, and I have a cowboy named Owen Blake to thank for it. Her mother's eyes widened at the sum. Zelda, how did you manage this? When you left earlier, you looked so defeated. Zelda sat on the edge of the bed and told her mother the entire story, from Owen's intervention to the confrontation with Cartwright. Her mother listened with increasing amazement, and when Zelda finished, she reached out and took her daughter's hand. This Owen Blake sounds like a good man, she said softly. A rare thing in this world. He does seem good, Zelda agreed cautiously. But Mama, I barely know him. I cannot let myself get carried away with romantic notions just because he helped me. Her mother smiled, the expression bringing a hint of her former vitality back to her thin face. I am not suggesting you marry the man tomorrow, dear. But I am suggesting that when a good man shows interest in you, it might be worth exploring. You have been so focused on taking care of me and surviving that you have not allowed yourself any happiness. Perhaps that could change. Zelda squeezed her mother's hand gently. "Perhaps," she allowed. "But for now, let us focus on getting you well. With this money, I can pay the doctor and buy proper food and medicine. That is what matters most." Over the following weeks, Zelda did indeed focus on her mother's care, using the money Owen had helped her recover to purchase medicine and nutritious food. Her mother's health improved slowly but steadily, the color returning to her cheeks and strength to her limbs. Zelda found work at the general store, where the owner, Mr. Patterson, appreciated her honesty and work ethic without trying to cheat her. She saw Owen occasionally in town, and each time her heart did a small, involuntary leap. They would exchange greetings, sometimes stop to talk for a few minutes about inconsequential things like the weather or town gossip. He never pressed her about the supper invitation, but the offer hung between them like a promise waiting to be fulfilled. One evening in late August, nearly a month after the confrontation with Cartwright, Zelda finished her shift at the general store and found Owen waiting outside. He was leaning against the post in that casual way of his, hat pulled low against the setting sun, and when he saw her, he straightened with a smile. "Miss Wright," he said politely, "I was hoping to catch you. Would you have a few minutes to walk with me?" Zelda felt her pulse quicken. "I suppose I could spare a few minutes," she said, trying to sound casual despite the sudden nervousness fluttering in her stomach. They walked together toward the edge of town, where the buildings gave way to open grassland and the Boys Mountains rose in the distance, purple and gold in the evening light. The air was warm but not oppressive, carrying the scent of sage and dust. "How is your mother?" Owen asked as they walked. "Much better, thank you," Zelda said, genuine happiness in her voice. "The doctor says she should make a full recovery with continued rest and proper nutrition. I cannot thank you enough for making that possible." "You earned that money yourself," Owen reminded her. "I just helped you collect it." They walked in silence for a bit, and then Owen stopped, turning to face her. The setting sun cast his face in warm light, highlighting the strong lines of his jaw and the serious set of his mouth. "Zelda, I know I said I would wait for you to accept my supper invitation, but I find I am not a very patient man. These past weeks, seeing you in town, talking with you, even these brief conversations have been the best parts of my days. I would very much like to spend more time with you, if you are willing." Zelda looked up at him, searching his face for any hint of insincerity or ulterior motive and finding none. Owen Blake was simply being honest, laying his interest out plainly without games or manipulation. It was refreshing and terrifying in equal measure. "I have not had much experience with courtship," she said honestly. "The men who have shown interest in me before wanted a wife to cook and clean and bear children. They did not care about who I was as a person." "I am not those men," Owen said quietly. "I want to know everything about you, Zelda. What you think about, what you dream of, what makes you laugh and what makes you angry. I am not looking for a housekeeper. I am looking for a partner, someone to build a life with based on mutual respect and genuine affection." Zelda felt tears prick at her eyes, emotion overwhelming her defenses. "That sounds wonderful," she admitted. "Almost too wonderful to be real." "It is real," Owen said, and he reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. When she did not move, he took her hand gently in his. His palm was calloused from years of hard work, warm and strong and solid. "I know trust does not come easy, especially after being treated poorly by people like Cartwright, but I am willing to earn your trust, Zelda, however long it takes." She looked down at their joined hands, then back up at his face. "I would like to have that supper with you," she said softly. "If the offer still stands." Owen's face broke into a genuine smile, the expression transforming his usually serious features. The offer definitely still stands. How about tomorrow evening? There is a decent restaurant near the railroad depot that serves excellent steak. Zelda agreed, and they walked back toward town hand in hand, talking more easily now that the tension of uncertainty had broken. Owen told her about his childhood in Missouri, about losing his father to cholera and watching his mother work herself to exhaustion. He spoke of learning to ride and shoot, of the restlessness that had driven him west after his mother's death, of the various ranches where he had worked over the years. In turn, Zelda told him about her own father, a dreamer who had died in a mining accident when she was 15, leaving her and her mother nearly destitute. She spoke of learning to sew and taking in piecework, of the frustration of being paid less than men for the same labor, of the determination to survive no matter what obstacles life threw at her. By the time they reached her building, the stars were beginning to emerge in the darkening sky, and Zelda felt more at ease with Owen than she had with anyone outside her mother in years. When he bid her good night with another gentle squeeze of her hand, she climbed the stairs feeling lighter than she had in months. The next evening, Zelda dressed in her best dress, a simple but well-made blue cotton that brought out her eyes. Her mother helped her arrange her dark hair, pinning it up in a style that was both practical and becoming. When Owen arrived precisely at 6 o'clock, looking scrubbed and handsome in clean clothes with his hair neatly combed, her mother gave him an appraising look and then nodded with approval. The restaurant near the railroad depot was modest but clean, with red checked tablecloths and the smell of good cooking filling the air. Owen ordered steak for both of them, along with potatoes and fresh bread, and they talked easily while they waited for the food. He asked about her work at the general store, and she found herself telling him about the various customers and their quirks, making him laugh with her descriptions of Mrs. Henderson's endless complaints about the heat. When the food arrived, it was delicious, and Zelda realized she had not enjoyed a meal this much in years. It was not just the quality of the food, though that was excellent, but the company and the knowledge that she could relax and be herself without pretense. "Tell me something nobody else knows about you," Owen said after they had finished eating and were lingering over coffee. Zelda considered the question carefully. "I used to want to be a teacher," she admitted. "Before my father died, I was enrolled in a teaching program. But after he passed, we could not afford it and I had to find work instead. Sometimes I still think about what that life might have been like, teaching children to read and write, helping them understand the world." Owen's expression was thoughtful. "That is not a dream you have to give up forever," he said. "Things change, circumstances improve. Maybe someday you could still pursue that." "Maybe," Zelda said, though she did not truly believe it. Life had taught her to be practical, not hopeful. "What about you? What do you want that you have not told anyone else?" Owen was quiet for a long moment, his fingers tracing patterns on the tablecloth. "I want to stop drifting," he said finally. "I want to find a place and a purpose worth staying for. I have been running from loss for so long that I forgot how to stand still and build something meaningful. But lately, being here in Caldwell, meeting you, I have started to remember what it feels like to want a future instead of just existing day to day." His words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Zelda felt her heart beat faster, recognizing the significance of what he was saying. He was not just talking about staying in Caldwell. He was talking about staying for her. "Owen," she said softly, "we have known each other barely a month. How can you be sure this is what you want?" He looked at her directly, his storm cloud eyes serious and honest. "I cannot explain it rationally, Zelda. I just know that when I helped you stand up to Cartwright, when I saw your courage and determination, something inside me shifted. You are not like anyone I have ever met. You are strong without being hard, brave without being reckless, kind despite having every reason to be bitter. Being around you makes me want to be a better man, to build a life worth living. That is not something I take lightly." Zelda felt tears threaten again, but this time they were not from pain or frustration but from a fragile, growing hope. "I feel it too," she confessed. "This connection between us. It frightens me because I have learned to protect myself, to not trust easily. But with you I want to try. I want to believe that good things are possible." Owen reached across the table and took her hand, his grip warm and reassuring. "Then let us try together. No promises beyond what we can honestly make, no expectations beyond treating each other with respect and honesty. We will see where this leads us." They left the restaurant hand in hand, walking through the warm evening toward Zelda's building. At her door, Owen paused, and then very slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, he leaned down and kissed her gently. It was sweet and tentative, a question more than a declaration, and Zelda found herself leaning into it, her hand coming up to rest against his chest where she could feel the steady beat of his heart. When they parted, both slightly breathless, Owen smiled down at her. "May I see you again tomorrow?" "Yes," Zelda said without hesitation. "And the day after that if you want." "I want," Owen assured her and kissed her again, this time with more confidence and warmth. Over the following months, Zelda and Owen became a familiar sight in Caldwell, walking together in the evenings, attending church on Sundays, sharing meals and conversation. Owen proved to be everything he had claimed, patient and respectful, interested in her thoughts and dreams, never pushing her beyond what she was ready to give. He met her mother properly and won her over completely by fixing the loose railing on their stairs without being asked and bringing fresh vegetables from the Henderson ranch. Zelda learned more about the man behind the calm exterior. She learned that he had a dry sense of humor that emerged when he was comfortable, that he loved reading and could recite poetry from memory, that he was scrupulously fair in all his dealings and would go out of his way to help someone in need. She learned that his hands were gentle despite their strength, that he kissed her as if she were something precious, that he listened when she spoke as if her words were the most important thing in the world. By November, when the weather turned cold and the first snow dusted the mountains, Owen came to her with a serious expression that made her heart clench with sudden worry. They were sitting on the porch of her building, wrapped in blankets against the chill, and he took her hand in his. "Zelda, I have been offered a foreman position at the Henderson Ranch," he said. "It is steady work with good pay, and Mr. Henderson has offered to let me build a house on the property if I want to stay permanent. I am going to accept the position, but before I do, I need to know something." He turned to face her fully, his eyes searching hers. "Is there a future for us? I'm not asking for promises you are not ready to make, but I need to know if I should be building a house for one or for two." Zelda's breath caught. This was the moment she had been both hoping for and dreading, the moment when she had to decide whether to trust completely or protect herself. She thought about the past 4 months, about every conversation and shared moment, about the way Owen made her feel safe and valued and loved. She thought about her mother's improving health and the money saved from her wages at the general store. She thought about the dreams she had set aside and the possibility of new dreams taking their place. "Build it for two," she said, her voice steady despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm her. "Owen Blake, I love you. I think I have loved you since you stood beside me facing down Cartwright, demanding justice when I thought I had no hope. If you are asking me to marry you, then my answer is yes." Owen's face lit up with joy, and he pulled her close, kissing her deeply while the cold wind swirled around them. When they finally parted, Both laughing and crying, he rested his forehead against hers. "I will build us a house," he promised. "A good, solid house with a big kitchen and a room for your mother and space for a family if we are so blessed. I will work hard every day to make you happy, Zelda. I swear it." "I do not need grand promises," Zelda said, cupping his face in her hands. "I just need you, Owen. Your honesty, your kindness, your strength, that is more than enough." They were married in early December 1883 in a simple ceremony at the church in Caldwell, with her mother and the Henderson family in attendance, along with Bill Thornton and Samuel Porter and other friends they had made in town. Zelda wore a cream-colored dress that her mother had sewn for the occasion, and Owen wore his best suit with a string tie and his father's pocket watch that he had carried for years. When Reverend Matthews pronounced them husband and wife, Owen kissed her with such tenderness and joy that several of the ladies in attendance wiped away tears. The house Owen had been building was not quite finished, so they spent their first weeks of marriage in a room at the Henderson ranch house, with Zelda's mother installed in a comfortable room nearby. Mrs. Henderson was delighted to have female company and treated Zelda like a daughter, teaching her the finer points of ranch management and introducing her to the various neighbors and friends. By late January, the house was complete, a sturdy two-story structure with a wraparound porch and large windows that let in the winter light. Owen had built it himself with help from other ranch hands, putting careful thought into every detail. The kitchen was spacious with a modern stove and plenty of counter space for baking and cooking. There was a comfortable sitting room with a fireplace, a bedroom for Zelda's mother on the ground floor so she would not have to manage stairs, and upstairs, a large bedroom for Owen and Zelda with space for a nursery nearby. On the day they moved in, Owen carried Zelda over the threshold while she laughed and protested that it was foolish. He set her down gently in the middle of the sitting room and gestured around at the space they would fill with their life together. "What do you think?" he asked, suddenly looking uncertain. "I know it is not fancy, but it is solid, and there is room to grow." Zelda walked through the house slowly, taking in every carefully built detail, every thoughtful touch that showed Owen had been thinking of her comfort and happiness. When she returned to him, her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "It is perfect," she said simply. "Our home, Owen. The first home I have ever had that felt truly safe and permanent. Thank you for building this for us." That night, they made love for the first time in their new bedroom, and Zelda discovered that physical intimacy with someone you loved and trusted was a revelation. Nothing like the frightening or dutiful act she had heard other women describe in whispers. Owen was patient and attentive, making sure she felt cherished and safe, and when they lay together afterward, his arms around her and her head on his chest, Zelda felt a contentment so profound it frightened her with its intensity. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. "More than I knew it was possible to love someone." Owen tightened his arms around her. "I love you too, Zelda Blake. You have given me a purpose and a home and a reason to build a future. I will spend the rest of my life trying to deserve you." The winter passed quietly and happily. Owen worked hard as foreman at the Henderson Ranch, managing the other hands and overseeing the care of the livestock. Zelda continued working at the general store, saving money and dreaming of the day she might have children to teach and nurture. Her mother's health continued to improve in the comfortable environment of their home, and she spent her days reading, sewing, and helping with the household tasks when she felt strong enough. In March, Zelda realized she had missed her monthly courses and felt a strange new fatigue that was different from ordinary tiredness. When the doctor confirmed she was pregnant, she felt a mixture of joy and terror. She told Owen that evening while they were sitting by the fire after supper, and his reaction was everything she could have hoped for. He gathered her into his arms, kissing her hair and murmuring words of love and reassurance. "We are going to be parents," he said wonderingly. "Zelda, you have made me the happiest man alive." "I am frightened," she admitted. "My mother nearly died when she had me, and I know childbirth is dangerous. What if something goes wrong?" Owen pulled back enough to look at her face, his expression serious but reassuring. "We will get you the best care available. Dr. Morrison is skilled, and we will make sure you have everything you need. But Zelda, you are the strongest person I know. If anyone can do this, you can." His confidence helped ease some of her fears. And as the months progressed and her body changed to accommodate the growing life within her, Zelda found herself becoming excited rather than just afraid. Owen was attentive to the point of being overbearing, insisting she rest frequently and not lift anything heavy. Her mother fussed over her constantly, making sure she ate properly and knitted tiny blankets and clothes for the coming baby. In October 1884, after a long and difficult labor, Zelda gave birth to a healthy baby boy. They named him Thomas Owen Blake, after Owen's father and in honor of the man Owen had become. When Owen held his son for the first time, tears streaming down his face, Zelda felt her heart swell with so much love she thought it might burst. "He is perfect," Owen whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you, Zelda, thank you for this gift." "He is our gift," Zelda corrected gently. "Our son, Owen. The first chapter of the family we are building together." Thomas was a good baby, healthy and alert, with his father's blue-gray eyes and his mother's dark hair. Owen proved to be a devoted father, taking turns with nighttime feedings and diaper changes without complaint, rocking his son to sleep while singing old cowboy ballads in his deep, soothing voice. Watching him with Thomas, Zelda fell in love with him all over again. The years passed in a pleasant rhythm of work and family life. In 1886, they welcomed a daughter, Emily Rose, who had Zelda's determined personality and Owen's calm temperament. In 1889, another son arrived, James Samuel, named after friends who had helped them along the way. The house that had seemed spacious when they built, it now rang with the sounds of children laughing and playing. Owen progressed from foreman to part owner of the Henderson Ranch when Mr. Henderson decided to semi-retire, and offered Owen and 2 other trusted employees the opportunity to buy shares in the operation. It was a risk, but Owen discussed it thoroughly with Zelda, respecting her opinion and input, and they decided together that it was a risk worth taking. The investment paid off, and by the early 1890s, the Blake family was financially secure in a way Zelda had never imagined possible. Through it all, Zelda never forgot the moment that had changed her life, the day Owen Blake had stood beside her and demanded justice from Horace Cartwright. She made sure her children knew the story, teaching them the importance of standing up for what was right and helping those who could not help themselves. Owen lived those values daily, treating his ranch hands fairly, paying honest wages, and never tolerating cheating or dishonesty in any form. In 1895, Zelda's mother passed away peacefully in her sleep at the age of 63, her final years having been comfortable and happy surrounded by her daughter, son-in-law, and grandchildren. They buried her in the Caldwell Cemetery with a proper headstone, and Zelda grieved the loss but was grateful for the extra time they had been given together, time that would not have been possible without the money Owen had helped her recover from Cartwright all those years ago. That evening, after the funeral and after the children were in bed, Zelda and Owen sat together on their porch, watching the sun set over the mountains. She leaned against him, drawing comfort from his solid presence. "I was thinking about the day we met," she said softly. "How different my life would be if you had not stepped in to help me. I would probably still be struggling, scraping by, never feeling secure or valued. You changed everything, Owen." He kissed the top of her head gently. "You changed everything for me too, Zelda. Before I met you, I was just drifting, existing but not really living. You gave me a purpose and a home and a family. You made me want to be the kind of man worth loving." "You were always worth loving," Zelda said firmly. "I just helped you see it." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to emerge, each lost in their own memories and gratitude for the life they had built together. It had not always been easy. There had been difficult years when drought threatened the ranch, when sickness swept through the family, when money was tight and worry kept them awake at night. But they had faced everything together, their partnership growing stronger with each challenge overcome. In 1898, their youngest child, a daughter they named Grace Helen, was born, surprising them both as they had thought their family was complete. Grace was a joy, a late blessing who charmed everyone she met with her sunny disposition and quick smile. Thomas was 14 by then, already helping on the ranch and showing signs of becoming a skilled horseman like his father. Emily was 12, bright and determined, already talking about becoming a teacher like her mother had once dreamed of being. James was 9, adventurous and curious, constantly asking questions and exploring the world around him. One evening in the summer of 1899, Owen came home with news that made Zelda's heart skip a beat. "Horace Cartwright died," he said without preamble. "Heart attack, apparently." His business affairs were a mess, lots of debts and failed investments. Turns out his reputation never recovered from what happened with you. Workers avoided him, and he had to hire less skilled men who did shoddy work, which led to failed contracts and financial problems. He died basically broke. Zelda felt a complex mixture of emotions at the news. She had long since forgiven Cartwright in her heart, not because he deserved it, but because carrying that anger had served no purpose. But hearing that his dishonesty had ultimately destroyed him felt like a closing of a circle. "I do not take pleasure in his downfall," she said slowly, "but there is a kind of justice in it, is there not? The way he treated people caught up with him eventually." "There is justice in it," Owen agreed. "But the real justice was you getting your honest wages and us building this life together. Cartwright's fate is just a footnote. Our story is what matters." He was right, of course. Their story was what mattered. The story of a woman who refused to be cheated, and a cowboy who believed in standing up for what was right. The story of two people who found love in the midst of injustice and built a family based on mutual respect, honesty, and unwavering support. As the new century dawned in 1900, the Blake family gathered to celebrate not just the turn of the calendar, but the 17 years of marriage that had brought them to this point. Thomas was nearly 16, already taller than his father, and being courted by several ranchers who wanted to hire him. Emily was 14, excelling in school and determined to attend the new teacher training program opening in Boise. James was 11, his curiosity undiminished, dreaming of becoming an engineer. Grace was 2, toddling around and getting into everything with gleeful determination. Owen raised a glass of cider and a toast, his arm around Zelda's waist. "To family," he said, his voice carrying to everyone gathered around the table. "To the blessings of honest work and honest love. To the woman who changed my life by letting me help change hers. To all of us and to the future we will build together." "To family," everyone echoed, glasses clinking. Zelda looked around the table at her children, at her husband whose love had never wavered, at the home they had built together. She thought about the frightened, angry young woman, she had been standing outside Horace Cartwright's office, convinced she had no recourse and no hope. She thought about Owen Blake stepping forward to stand beside her, demanding justice when she thought none was possible. "I have something to add," she said, standing with her own glass. "To second chances and unexpected blessings, to the courage to fight for what is right and the wisdom to accept help when it is offered. To Owen, who taught me that I deserved better and then spent every day since proving it. I love you all more than words can express." Later that night, after the children were asleep and the house was quiet, Owen and Zelda lay in bed talking softly about the future. Emily's education, Thomas's prospects, James's dreams, Grace's development. They talked about the ranch and plans for expansion, about possibly buying additional land to the north. They talked about growing old together, watching their children have children of their own, building a legacy that would outlast them both. "You ever regret not pursuing teaching?" Owen asked, his fingers playing gently with her hair. "I know you gave up that dream when your father died, and then we started our family so quickly." Zelda considered the question seriously. It was true that she had never become a schoolteacher in the traditional sense, but she had taught her children to read and write, had helped other ranch families with their children's education, had served on the school board advocating for better resources and fair treatment of all students. "I found a different way to teach," she said finally, "and I have no regrets about the life we built together. Sometimes our dreams change shape, Owen. They do not disappear, they just transform into something different than we originally imagined." "You are a wise woman, Zelda Blake," Owen said, kissing her softly. "I am a lucky man." "We are both lucky," Zelda corrected. "Lucky that we found each other. Lucky that we had the courage to build this life together. Lucky in ways that have nothing to do with chance and everything to do with the choices we made." In the years that followed, they watched their children grow and establish their own paths. Thomas married a rancher's daughter and took over day-to-day operations of the Blake portion of the ranch, proving to be as fair and honest as his father. Emily attended the teacher training program in boys and returned to Caldwell to teach at the local school, finally fulfilling the dream her mother had once set aside. She married a young lawyer who shared her passion for education and social justice, and together they worked to improve conditions in Idaho Territory. James pursued his dream of engineering, attending school in Seattle and eventually working on railroad projects throughout the West. He wrote long letters home describing his adventures and the places he had seen, always promising to return to Idaho eventually. Grace grew into a spirited young woman who wanted to be a doctor, a shocking ambition for a girl in the early 1900s, but one that her parents supported fully. Owen and Zelda grew older together gracefully, their love deepening with the passage of time. Owen's hair turned silver, and lines appeared around his eyes from years of squinting into the sun. Zelda's hands developed calluses from work and arthritis from age, but they were still the hands Owen reached for every morning and every night. They sat together on their porch in the evenings, watching the sun set over the mountains, talking about everything and nothing, comfortable in the silence that comes from truly knowing another person. In 1910, on their 27th wedding anniversary, Owen surprised Zelda with a gift. It was a leather-bound journal, expensive and beautiful, with her name embossed on the cover. "I want you to write our story," he said. "Everything that happened, from the day we met to now, for our grandchildren and their children, so they know where they came from and what values built this family." Zelda accepted the gift with tears in her eyes. "Our story," she repeated. "It has been quite a story, has it not?" "The best story," Owen agreed. "A love story and a story about justice and fighting for what is right." about refusing to accept being treated unfairly and standing beside each other no matter what challenges came. That is a legacy worth preserving. Zelda spent the following months filling the journal with careful handwriting, recording every detail she could remember. She wrote about growing up poor, about losing her father, about taking the construction job out of desperation, and being cheated by Horace Cartwright. She wrote about Owen stepping forward to help her, about the confrontation that got her wages plus interest, about falling in love and building a life together. She wrote about their children and grandchildren, about the ranch and the community they had helped build in Caldwell. When she finished, she read the entire thing aloud to Owen over several evenings, and they laughed and cried together, remembering their journey. "It is a good story," Owen said when she finished. "An honest story about honest people trying to do right by each other. I am proud of the life we built, Zelda." "So am I," she said, leaning against him. "So am I." They continued working the ranch well into their 60s, though they gradually turned more responsibilities over to Thomas and his growing family. They traveled a bit, visiting James in Seattle and exploring parts of the country they had never seen. But they always returned to Caldwell, to the house Owen had built with his own hands, to the community where they had put down roots. In 1918, as World War I was ending and the world was changing in ways they could hardly fathom, Owen fell ill with pneumonia. Despite the best medical care available, he weakened rapidly, his strong body finally succumbing to age and disease. Zelda sat beside his bed day and night, holding his hand and reminding him of their life together. "I am not afraid," Owen told her one evening, his voice weak but steady. "I have lived a good life, Zelda, a life full of love and purpose and meaning. You gave me that. You and our children and the family we built together. I have no regrets." "Do not talk like that," Zelda said, tears streaming down her face. "You are going to recover. You have to recover because I cannot imagine this world without you in it." Owen smiled weakly and squeezed her hand with what little strength he had left. "You are the strongest person I have ever known. You will be fine, Zelda. You will live and love and watch our grandchildren grow. You will keep our story alive." He paused, struggling for breath. "Thank you for letting me love you. Thank you for building this life with me. You made every day worth living." "Owen," Zelda sobbed, clutching his hand desperately. "I love you so much. You saved me, do you understand? You saved my life that day outside Cartwright's office, and you saved my heart every day since. You are my everything." "And you are mine," Owen whispered. "Always have been, always will be. Even death cannot change that." He passed away peacefully that night with Zelda holding his hand, and all their children gathered around the bed. He was 63 years old, and he had lived every one of those years with integrity and love. They buried him in the Caldwell Cemetery next to Zelda's mother, under a big oak tree with a view of the mountains he had loved. Zelda grieved deeply, but did not break. She was 72 years old and had weathered many storms in her life. She continued living in the house Owen had built, surrounded by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. She told their story often, making sure that every generation understood what their grandfather had stood for and how their family had been built on foundations of justice and love. On quiet evenings, she would sit on the porch alone, looking at the mountains and feeling Owen's presence beside her as strongly as if he were still alive. She would remember the day he had stepped forward to help her, a stranger with storm-cloud eyes and an unshakable sense of what was right. She would remember falling in love, getting married, building a home and raising children. She would remember every laugh and every tear, every triumph and every challenge they had faced together. In 1925, at the age of 79, Zelda passed away in her sleep, peacefully and without pain. Her children found her in her bed with a smile on her face, and the leather journal Owen had given her clutched in her hands. They buried her next to Owen, and on her headstone they inscribed the words that best captured her life. She fought for justice and found love. Beloved wife, mother, and grandmother, her strength built a legacy. The house Owen built still stood decades later, occupied by various generations of Blake descendants. The story of how Owen and Zelda met, how a cowboy stood up to a crooked businessman and collected every penny owed plus interest, became family legend. It was told at gatherings and celebrations, passed down through the generations as an example of courage and integrity, and the power of standing up for what is right. The ranch prospered under Blake management, maintaining the values of fair dealing and honest work that Owen and Zelda had established. Workers knew they would be treated fairly and paid honestly, just as Zelda had deserved to be paid back in 1883. The family supported education and social justice causes, particularly those focused on fair labor practices and women's rights, honoring the struggles that had brought Owen and Zelda together. Emily's descendants became teachers and lawyers and advocates, fighting for equality and justice in their own times. James's engineering work contributed to the development of the American West, building infrastructure that connected communities and improved lives. Thomas's children and grandchildren continued ranching, maintaining the land and traditions with care and respect. Grace became one of the first female doctors in Idaho, overcoming tremendous obstacles to achieve her dream, carrying forward her mother's determination and her father's steady support. The leather journal Zelda had written became a treasured family heirloom, carefully preserved and shared with each new generation. In it, they could read in Zelda's own words about the day she met Owen, about being cheated by Horace Cartwright, about Owen's intervention and the confrontation that got her $46.20. They could read about falling in love, about building a home, about raising children and facing challenges together. They could see the truth that had defined Owen and Zelda's entire relationship. That love was not just romantic feelings but also standing beside each other, fighting for what was right, and building something meaningful together. The story of Owen Blake and Zelda Wright became more than just family legend. It became a parable about justice and love, about refusing to accept unfair treatment and standing up for others who could not stand up for themselves. It was a reminder that one person's courage to intervene could change lives, that love could grow from acts of justice, and that a life built on honest foundations would endure through generations. In the small cemetery in Caldwell, Idaho, 2 headstones stood side by side under the oak tree. One for Owen Blake, who had believed that doing right by others was the most important thing a man could do. One for Zelda Wright Blake, who had refused to be cheated and had built a legacy of strength and love. Together, even in death, just as they had been together in life. Their story lived on not just in words and memories, but in the values they had instilled in their descendants, in the ranch that still operated on principles of fair dealing, in the community they had helped build. Every time someone stood up against injustice, every time someone demanded fair treatment, every time someone helped another person fight for what they deserved, the spirit of Owen and Zelda's story continued. The construction site where Zelda had worked in 1883 had long since been completed and demolished and rebuilt multiple times as Caldwell grew and changed. But the lessons from that confrontation outside Horace Cartwright's office remained relevant across the decades. The principle that workers deserved honest pay for honest work, that written agreements should be honored, that standing up for what was right mattered more than avoiding conflict. These truths transcended time and circumstance. In the end, the story of Owen and Zelda was not just about collecting wages owed plus interest, though that moment had been pivotal. It was about recognizing the humanity in another person, about having the courage to intervene when witnessing injustice, about building love on foundations of mutual respect and shared values. It was about two people who found each other at exactly the right moment, when one needed help and the other needed purpose, and who created something beautiful and lasting from that meeting. The house still stood in the early 21st century, carefully maintained by Blake descendants who understood its significance. The porch where Owen and Zelda had sat together countless evenings, the bedroom where they had loved each other and welcomed their children into the world, the kitchen where family meals had been shared and stories told, all of it remained as a testament to the life they had built together. Visitors to the Caldwell Cemetery could still find their headstones under the oak tree, side by side as they had been in life. In the spring, wildflowers bloomed around the graves, and in summer, the tree provided shade for those who came to pay respects. The inscriptions on the stones told only the barest facts of their lives, but for those who knew the story, those simple markers represented something profound. The story of how a construction boss refused to pay fair wages, and how a cowboy collected every penny owed plus interest, became more than history. It became inspiration for anyone facing injustice, reminder that standing up for what is right matters, that love can grow from acts of courage, and that a life lived with integrity creates a legacy that endures long after we are gone. Owen and Zelda's love story, born from a moment of injustice and intervention, proved that sometimes the most powerful romances begin not with grand gestures, but with simple acts of decency and courage. Their happily ever after was not a fairy tale ending but something better, a real life built on honest love, mutual respect, and unwavering commitment to each other, and to doing what was right. That legacy lived on in their descendants, in the values they had taught, and in the story that continued to be told generation after generation, a story of justice and love in the Wild West that would never be forgotten.